They built a whole system when you're not knowing your worth. Today, that changes. Take the risk, make the move, build the life. I'm Gabrielle Elisabeth, and this is the Audacity. When someone asks you what you do for a living, what's your answer? If you said you were an actor, a singer, a dancer, an artist, you left out a very, very important part. You're a business. And if nobody's told you that, let me be the first one to do that, because you are. We literally can register ourselves as an LLC. That's something that I'm learning more about day by day. And hopefully I can have someone on that can talk to us more about what that looks like, because I'm not even in an LLC yet. And there are certain things that come with that once you register yourself that way with the IRS. However, even if you are not an LLC yet, you are still a business. You still have to go out and find gigs, audition, buy clothing for it. All of gym memberships, all of these things are tax write-offs at the end of the day. Now, I know things with taxes are getting tricky because of our administration, but that's why I hire someone that is much smarter than I am to handle all of those things. And I suggest that you do as well. Now, I always think that it's important to be informed. So there are books, of course, that you can listen to or read or listen to if you want Audible. There are YouTube channels that you can find just to educate yourself within that field. But stop treating yourself like this is a hobby, because it's not. If you are an artist, you are a business. You, just like the people who are in corporate America and are going to their jobs in their suits. Yes, you might be heading to rehearsal in your sweats. That does not diminish your value and what you have to offer to this space or this economy. So start treating yourself that way. That's number one. The moment it clicked for me that I was a business was honestly when I started deciding that I wanted to start a family. I haven't done that biologically yet. I do have a fiance and a stepson, and that they are my family. But once I started really deciding that I wanted to give birth to my own child and to buy a house and have all of these things that the world tells us we're supposed to, that's when it really clicked to me that, oh, this isn't just for fun anymore. I need to find a way to make this like work for me, as opposed to me just going from gig to gig to gig to gig, and finding ways to invest my money, finding ways to like actually know how much I'm making per year. And that sounds crazy, but like for the longest time, I wasn't actually quite sure how much I made until I talked to my tax guy. I wasn't budgeting correctly. I wasn't understanding how my money was actually serving me, or how it wasn't serving me, and how I was wasting it in so many other small areas. And this affected me like deeply, to the point where I was undercharging anytime someone would ask for me to sing. It just felt like a privilege to be asked, or like even when it came down to negotiating my contract for Broadway, I just accepted what they offered, because I was like, of course, yes, you're saying yes to me, then yes, the answer is yes. I don't care what it is, just put me on that stage. And I don't regret any of that, because I was so young, and I do think that there is something to say about paying your dues. We all have to do it. So no, as soon as you get out of college, you shouldn't be trying to negotiate for the highest rate possible. But as you continue to build your resume or continue to have work experience, if you aren't in the arts, however you are building your work experience, that is quantifiable. The longer you do something, the more you are proven, which means that you can charge more. We charge a premium. And there were moments in the past where I was just saying yes to everything when I shouldn't have been. I should have been charging. And if people say no and they're not willing to pay the price that I am asking for, that is totally okay. No harm, no foul. We can just leave it on the table and move on. But you're cutting yourself short by not even asking. And it got to the point where I really had to sit with myself and ask, am I successful? What do I have to show for it? And my ex, who was my partner at the time, he called me a loser. He actively said that to me. And I had to really sit with myself. Number one, that's why he's my ex. But I had to really sit with myself and decide if I was going to take on that identity. This was during the pandemic. So Most of us artists were not working. We didn't know where our next job was going to come from. And I was working for a tech company at the time. And, I was just kind of cashing a check. I was moving up in the ranks because I believe that whatever you find with your hand to do, you do with all your might. So I was rising up and doing well. And he was like, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? Do you want to be a loser? So like, maybe he didn't call me directly loser, but it felt like he was calling me a loser because he put my name and loser in the same sentence. And that was not okay with me. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? That's what I really took from that. Like, how am I going to move forward? So then I started getting back into dance classes. I started looking for different opportunities to act and pursue the industry that had already brought me so much at that point. But it was a hard pill to swallow because in hindsight, yes, it felt like an attack on my ego and my character and like who I was inherently. But that's when I was attaching what I do with who I am. And now I realize that those are not the same thing. We can talk more about that in another episode. If you want, let me know. But what I learned was I can enjoy this art form of acting and performing arts, but that's not who I am. And also the business aspect of that can be completely different from the enjoyment. And I used to always say that I didn't want to make money from my art because that makes my art feel icky. And it still kind of does, but I had to start framing it in a different way so that it didn't feel so much like capitalism, which, look, capitalism serves its place and its purpose. But when it came down to me like emoting and like putting my art out there, it felt icky and I didn't like it. And it made me not like my art, especially like Broadway is a machine. There's the beauty of getting onto Broadway and you're making your Broadway debut, you're fulfilling a lifelong dream, but then it becomes a job. You have to go to number 2 at this moment. You have to go to number 8 because there are numbers at the bottom of the stage where you're supposed to be so that the lighting designer can do his job and light you in that spot. Because when they created the show, that's where that person went or that's where that person was blocked to go. And now you have to do that every single night. Now, the way you get there, you get to kind of finesse that. You get to kind of add your own spin to that, but you got to get there by a certain time and at that number. And it becomes very, very monotonous, but that's the job. That's the job portion of it. So when people get so caught up in auditioning and they don't enjoy it and they're so upset because they're not getting the job, I've learned to enjoy the in-betweens. It still hurts sometimes, but I get to live so much more life in the in-betweens. And you can make money in so many other different ways. But again, it goes back to that same idea that I mentioned a moment ago, where I can't put what I do in cahoots with who I am. It doesn't serve anybody, no matter how great your job is or how small your job is, whether you're a server at a restaurant or a Murdoch and you run Fox News, whatever. It doesn't matter. You're still a human being at the end of the day. And that's just what you do. It's not who you are. So I touched on this a little bit in the previous episode about our income feeling like it's irregular, especially when you're in the arts. Now, I think that this also applies if you work in the service industry or anywhere that you are tip-based as opposed or gigging or contracting versus like exactly how much you're making every single month, which is usually corporate America or something of that nature. Now, the arts industry pays in waves. And the best way that I'm able to actually understand how much I'm making each month or per year is by having a target for the month I calculate my bills, I calculate how much play money I want, how much I want to invest, and then I work backwards from there to see how much work I actually need to do that month so that I can meet my goal and my target. I think a lot of people use the fact that their money is irregular, quote unquote, as an excuse to not budget. And really, because your money is not set every single month, it's a reason to budget, smarter. It is absolutely necessary, because how can you ever truly grow wealth if you don't know how much you're actually bringing in every month or every year? So earning money comes and goes. You can work a job, you get $500, you have your rent, that takes half of it, if not all of it, and then you move forward. Now, if you want to build wealth, that happens while you're sleeping. So I mentioned that my fiance is in the wealth management space. He works for a major company that I'm not going to name, but he works for a major company. And he has really, really helped me get into the investing world. Now, if you don't have somebody that can help you figure out where you should invest, you can always invest into the S&P 500. You can get a high yield savings account. Those are ways that you can start making money and accruing interest while you're sleeping, because you want your money to work for you. That is how you accrue wealth. Now, it can be a little scary. Like maybe you have some debt, maybe you just don't even know where to start. There are so many resources that I can mention. I'll probably mention that at the end of this video, and I'll put it in the description box at the below. But there are so many ways to at least get started. You can do Robinhood, you can do Acorn. The world is so vast now that you really don't have an excuse to start. And I know people say that you should be completely debt-free before you begin investing. I don't agree with that. Well, now look, I'm not a finance person per se, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I am not trying to financial advise anybody. I will say that for legal reasons, but it doesn't hurt to put away $25 a week if you can spare it, or $100 a month if you can spare it, and put that away as if it doesn't exist and put it towards an investment of some sort. Or just put it in an account until it gets to a certain amount, open a high yield savings account. You know, we have to start using our money smarter. Maybe you don't buy that coffee. If you spent $5 every single day on a coffee, that's 5 times 7, that's $35 a month, or a week, I mean. Think about how much that accumulates to over a year's time. And for the love of God, know your rate and stop negotiating it. Because as soon as you give somebody a range of how much your services cost, they're always going to undercut you. They're always going to take the lower number. If you're like, yeah, for lessons, I range between $50 and $75. They're going to ask for $50. They are, because why wouldn't they? I would. Doesn't everybody want a deal? So set your rate, know your worth. And if somebody says no, thank you, that is their right. Because you know what? If that person is meant to be a part of your business, they're going to stay. They are. And then you don't have to worry about trying to get 3 clients for the price of what you would have charged that one person. So it may take a little bit more time, but it's always worth it. And when you're sure of your worth, people are going to respect that. But you have to believe it first. So years and years and years ago, probably about 7 to 8 years ago, my now best friend asked me if I wanted to go to a Suze Orman, speech, presentation, whatever. It was in Harlem, and it was in between our shows. So we really had to book it there and book it back. And I said yes. And it was one of the best yeses that I ever could have said, because at the time, I didn't know that I was going to be going through a divorce and having to figure out how to live independently on my own again. And something that Suze Orman said was, as a woman, we really need to make sure that we always have our own money. There's nothing wrong with having a shared account. You can have that, especially for bills and things like that. You figure out what works for you and your partner. But as a woman, a lot of times we end up in the maternal role. We end up being the ones that leave work and take care of the children and take care of the home and aren't worried about how the money's actually coming in. We're just making sure that things are paid for around the house and managing our home. That's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. My mother was that way. But then what happens if the marriage dissolves? You don't know how much your husband makes or how much the household is making. You don't know what bills are being paid. You don't know necessarily how much the mortgage is. You don't know these things. You don't know how much the house is worth because you've been trusting your partner, which again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it is so empowering to know that you don't have to ask permission to buy something below a certain amount, or like have transparency to purchase something without your partner's consent because you have your own money. Or like I said, God forbid the relationship dissolves, you have an exit plan. You have a credit card. You have your own personal accounts so that you can take care of yourself and facilitate building this life back up. Now, I dealt with that. I was always very independent. I always had my own money, even before I went to this conference or this presentation from Suze Orman. But hearing the way that she put it just really resonated with me and allowed me to think of it in a broader sense. So Suze Orman has a book that's called Secret Currency. I highly suggest that you read it. I read it after I went to that conference, and it was so informative. I also read the book by Dave Ramsey, The Total Money Makeover. That's worth a read as well. There are so many different places where you can get financial help and education, and I just highly suggest that you take the time to do it. You're going to be a student, you're going to feel dumb, but don't let that discourage you. Push forward, push through that resistance, be audacious, do the thing that people don't want you to do. Not the administration, the system does not want you to have this information. So get it. It's literally at our fingertips. If you don't want to read a book, do the audiobook. If you don't want to do the audiobook, find a YouTube channel of somebody talking about it, because I guarantee that you'll find it. And it's so, so worth it. Now look, Financial Literacy Month is coming to an end. So this will be probably the last time that I'll really speak about this so in depth. We're going to move on to other episodes and other topics. But look, if you come from a family that did not have a lot of wealth like I did, where you're just trying to figure things out on the fly and you feel like you're so behind, you are. But the beauty of that is you are a blank slate. You're a blank slate, and you just need to fill yourself up with so much knowledge to where you become a professional at it. Just learn as much as you can. Be a novice, be a beginner, and I promise you it will pay back in dividends. Because we don't know what we don't know. So throw the shame away and just learn and be a sponge and start from where you are. If you're in debt, fine. I've been in debt before. I was $40,000 in debt from student loans, and I paid it off one loan at a time. I did the pyramid method where I started with the smallest loan and I just kept chipping away at it. And it worked. I paid it off with my Broadway money. And it was one of the best decisions that I ever made. And it gave me so much financial freedom. So I highly suggest that you do it. I highly suggest that you take the time to learn about financial literacy and empower yourself. It'll change your life. Okay, now let's talk about action. Last week I gave you a task. I told you to put 25 to 30% of your money into a don't touch fund. And that way, that's what goes to your taxes, and you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay the IRS when they call. Now, this time, for this episode, for this week, I want you to look at your last 3 months of spending, and I want you to categorize where all of your money went. No judgment. Just literally facts and figures of where the money is going, because you can't grow wealth with your eyes closed. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm so happy that you came back to listen to another episode of the Audacity. And remember, permission is not required. I love you guys. Bye.